Greetings, ABSS. This is a recording of the October 2023 session titled K-5 Designing Student Independent Tasks with Google Classroom. Here are the objectives for this session. We will observe the Google Classroom features such as topics, assignments, materials, questions, and the newest feature, practice sets, and interactive YouTube. Participants will experience Google Classroom features from a student perspective, explore Google Classroom features from the teacher's perspective, and collaborate and design experiences for students within Google Classroom. Before we get started with the session, I want to talk about some alignment. So first, let's talk about the alignment to the ABSS strategic plan and portrait of a graduate. So how might we implement this practice, right? So there are 4 components of the ABSS portrait of a graduate. There's adaptability, balanced, self-reliant, and solution-oriented. So with the component of communication, how could we implement Google Classroom questions to address this? With collaboration, thinking about how Google Slide assignments are collaborative. So what could that look like in our classrooms? With learner mindset and personal responsibility, how could we think about using the Google Classroom practice sets and interactive YouTube questions to address these competencies? And then with critical thinking and problem solver, how could we use Google Classroom questions and Google Slide assignments to address these competencies? So we're going to explore that today. Then the alignment to the North Carolina Teacher Evaluation rubric. So within your evaluation, there is standard 3, where teachers know the content they teach, and teachers make instruction relevant to students. And then there's teachers facilitate learning for their students, and that teachers know the ways in which learning takes place, and they know the appropriate levels of intellectual, physical, social, and emotional development of their students. So think about how this evaluation rubric plays a part into how we design learning experiences for our students. And then the alignment to the ISTE standards for teachers. If you've been around a while, you know that North Carolina had digital learning competencies, yet we have now shifted to the ISTE standards for educators. So we'll no longer use the MC digital learning competencies. Effective July 1st, we have transitioned over to the ISTE standards for educators and students. So under those competencies, we wanted to talk about designer and facilitator. So educators design authentic learning driven activities in environments that recognize and accommodate learning variability. And facilitator, educators facilitate learning with technology to support student achievement of the ISTE standards for students. So we'll think about how these ISTE standards align to the work that we could do with these Google Classroom features we're going to talk about today. Then let's talk about the gradual release model and blended learning practices, or better yet, just lesson planning in general, right? So during teacher-directed instruction. So here are the components, how we define it, and then here's the Google Classroom feature that might align to that component. All right, so thinking about strong hooks where we capture and connect, could we use Google Classroom questions for that? Then with the presentation or the I do portion, this is usually where we don't use much technology, but if there were something that you wanted students to use during your I do when you're modeling, could that go in Google Classroom as materials, right, where it's just view only or access only? With the guided practice, where we know we do or to do that group and partner work, could we use things like practice sets or interactive YouTube here? The lesson closure or performance monitoring, could we use practice sets and interactive YouTube? And then independent practice is where technology fits best when thinking about our student learning experience, right? The you do. So how could we use practice sets and interactive YouTube here? Then blended learning practices and models during small group instruction. So how might we leverage Google Classroom features such as practice sets and interactive YouTube during small group instruction? So if you wanted to know more about blended learning and models and practices here in ABSS, you can go to this site and take a look. Here's a slide deck that'll show you a little bit more. And then here are some examples of the models in accompanying practice. So if you were thinking about modified flip, could you use instructional videos? If you were thinking of station rotation, which we use a lot in elementary, how could we use things like choice boards or individual station rotation with playlists and that flex with digital pathways? So there are different examples. Feel free to take a copy or look at some examples of how you might do this in your classroom. And then here are some tips for managing classrooms during small group instruction. Today's session is not going to focus as much on these models and practices, yet if you're interested, be sure to come back for the December session. All right, so during this portion of this session, what we did is we tried out these features from the student's perspective, right? So we joined the Google Classroom link that it will be provided for you, and participants tried at least 2 of the 3 try it tasks. So in Google Classroom, you will see that I use the topic feature, right, to organize the different topics. So here was practice sets, here's YouTube Interactive, and here's questions in Google Slide examples. So under the topic, we've seen that there were assignments and then there were materials, right? So what we did was we chose 2 of the 3 try-its to try out. So let me show you what that looks like. So when you go to the Google Classroom, you'll go to classwork, and then you could come down to these topics and choose 2 of the 3 try-its. So first, here was practice sets. So students would look at the question and pick their answer. I did want to point out how there's extra help here, and with the extra help, you can add in your own text boxes, or you can even add in YouTube videos to be extra help for students with practice sets. All right, so you can try that out. And then we could try out the YouTube Interactive. So this is a YouTube video, and what it's going to do is it's going to play the video, but it's going to stop at certain points and ask you different questions. Okay. And then participants had the opportunity to look at Google Classroom questions. They wanted to try that out. And then there were some resources there that talked about Google Slide assignments. So we spent time doing that during the session. And after participants had time to experience these features from a student's perspective, then we talked about, why might you implement this practice? What did you notice as you experienced this practice from a student lens? And how might creating this type of experience for your students positively impact the learning for students in your classroom? Then we moved on from looking at it from a student's perspective to a teacher's perspective. So like, how do we even design tasks like this? So in Google Classroom, you'll see that I have created materials that will walk you through creating practice sets, creating YouTube Interactive, and then exploring questions and Google Slide assignments. So let's go to Google Classroom to see those. So under practice sets for materials, here's a video for teachers about how to make practice sets. Under YouTube Interactive, here's a video about how to make interactive YouTube questions. And then under questions in Google Slide examples, there is some a choice board for you to explore the different features of Google Slides, so you can make your own Google Slide assignments. And then here's some information about how to make a question in Google Classroom, and then some exemplars. So you would want to go to Google Classroom and take a look at how you might design those tasks for your students. After that portion of this session, we moved on to what it might look like in practice, right? So the participants were able to continue to explore, plan, and design. So participants had a choice. They could join a breakout room to collaborate with their peers, or they stayed in the main session to learn more or ask questions of the facilitator. So in the planning process, we thought about what's an upcoming standard unit, what lessons or tasks might you have planned, and could they be refined by implementing a practice from today's session? So not changing what your plans were, but looking to refine them using some of the features that we talked about if they were able to do so. And how could leveraging a Google Classroom feature positively impact teaching and learning in your classroom? So we took some time and collaborated and planned using the features that we learned about. Then we wrapped up the session by spending some time reflecting. And the questions that were asked was after attending today's session, what might be your next steps? What do you want to stay mindful of? And how might I support you? And would you like to connect after this session? So participants had time to reflect and put their reflections in the chat during this portion. We wrapped up our time together and participants were able to get the link to the slides. We talked about the PD archive where this recording was housed, and we talked about upcoming professional development opportunities. As always, I want to draw your attention to my contact information. My name is Brittany Jackson. I'm the K-12 Blended Learning Specialist here in ABSS. Here's my email, my mobile and text, and a link to the Blended Learning site. Please, please, please don't hesitate to reach out if there's anything I can do to support you. Thanks for all you do.